Picture this: a plane falls from the sky, swallowed by the vast, merciless ocean. Metal tears, screams vanish, and silence is replaced by the roar of endless waves. Alone, adrift, battered and broken, the fight begins not against enemies that can be seen, but against hunger that claws like fire, thirst that burns like poison, and the crushing weight of despair. Whispering, "Give up." But giving up is not an option. Every sunrise becomes a victory, every breath a rebellion against the sea. This is not just a story of survival. It is proof of the unstoppable power of never letting go. The sky stretched wide, painted with calm blues, carrying the illusion that nothing could disturb its quiet beauty. The ocean mirrored that calmness, a sheet of endless water that seemed to hold both serenity and danger within its depths. The hum of engines once promised safety, routine, the certainty of reaching land again. Then, in a single instant, all of that was torn apart. The sound of steel cracking filled the air, a thunder louder than any storm. Fire licked through the cabin, smoke choked the lungs, and the impossible became reality. The plane was no longer a machine of flight, but a falling mass, surrendering to gravity. Time seemed to slow as the descent began. Screams blended with the roar of breaking metal, seats shuddered, the world spun. The body braced instinctively, clinging to whatever anchor it could find. The mind screamed questions, why? How? Is this the end? But none had answers. The horizon tilted, the sea rose up to meet the broken bird, and in that collision of air and water, silence was ripped apart by chaos. Impact with the ocean was not like sinking into water, it was like hitting concrete. The body jolted, the chest slammed against restraints, bones rattled under the force. Water rushed in, colder than ice, more merciless than stone. Everything became a blur of darkness and bubbles, an explosion of panic. Instinct took over. Fight the pull, claw toward the surface, find air before the lungs burst. The taste of salt water burned the throat, each movement slowed by the weight of soaked clothes, the ocean eager to drag everything down. Breaking the surface brought no comfort, only more chaos. Debris floated everywhere. Shards of metal, torn seats, fragments of lives reduced to wreckage. The sky above, once serene, now carried black smoke rising in columns. The ocean, once still, now churned with violence, swallowing pieces of the fallen machine. Shouts and cries echoed across the waves, carried by wind and desperation, but quickly faded under the relentless roar of the sea. Every breath felt stolen, every gasp torn from the edge of drowning. The body trembled from shock, from cold, from disbelief. The brain struggled to process what had just happened. Moments before there had been altitude, structure, order. Now there was only survival, stripped raw and unforgiving. There was no captain's voice assuring safety, no steady hum of engines. Only water pressing in on every side, and the knowledge that land was nowhere in sight. The ocean stretched infinite, swallowing hope as easily as it swallowed debris. No landmarks, no guiding stars, no guarantee that anyone would ever know where the fall had happened. Above, gulls circled, drawn by instinct to tragedy, their cries sharp against the silence that followed the crash. Below, unseen depths waited, dark and unknowable. Floating between those two worlds, a fragile existence clung desperately to each breath. Pain began to register. The sting of salt in the eyes, cuts from jagged metal, the aching pull of muscles already overworked. Yet the heart kept hammering, a reminder that life had not yet surrendered. Every wave that slapped against the body was a test, every pull of the current a challenge. There was no comfort, no steady ground, no certainty, only the will to keep the head above water, Smoke drifted across the sky, mixing with clouds, staining the once clear horizon. The ocean seemed endless, a liquid desert stretching in every direction. In that immensity, the crash was reduced to a tiny scar, soon to vanish completely. Panic whispered that rescue would never come, that the sea would claim everything, that this was where stories ended. Yet another voice rose louder, insisting that it could not end here. The thought of air, of one more breath, of holding on 1 second longer, became the single purpose. The shattering moment of steel and fire was more than destruction. It was a threshold. Before, there had been certainty, comfort, and illusion of control. After, there was only the raw truth. Life balanced on a blade, and survival demanded everything. The sky was no longer calm, the ocean no longer serene. They were enemies now, forces that demanded either surrender or defiance. In that vast emptiness, choices narrowed to one. Keep moving, keep breathing, keep fighting against the pull of the sea. What had begun as tragedy became trial. What had been a flight became a test of will. And as the waves rose and fell, as salt burned the throat and exhaustion weighed heavy, one truth became undeniable. The moment of impact was not the end, but the beginning of a war against nature. Itself, the sea was not gentle. It was a beast, swallowing everything it touched with icy jaws. The wreckage scattered like bones across the waves. Metal twisted, luggage torn open, fragments of seats drifting without direction. Each wave carried reminders of destruction, carrying them farther into the endless expanse. The water clung to the skin like chains, dragging downward with a weight that felt impossible to resist. The shock of the cold tore at the chest, leaving the heart pounding against ribs that ached from impact. Every movement was a struggle, every breath stolen from the ocean's grasp. Salt burned the throat, stung the eyes, and filled the mouth with bitterness. The air above was scarce, ragged, always at risk of vanishing beneath another surge of water. Breathing itself became a battle, each inhale desperate, each exhale a surrender to exhaustion. The body wanted rest, craved stillness, but stillness meant surrender, and surrender meant being claimed by the depths. Around, voices rose and fell, shouts swallowed by the crashing of waves. Some cries were sharp with panic, others faint, already fading into silence. Pieces of wreckage groaned as they shifted on the water's surface, wood splintering, metal groaning under the relentless push of the sea. The air carried the acrid scent of fuel, thick and suffocating, reminding that fire had preceded this flood. Survival now depended not only on staying above water, but also on avoiding the invisible poison drifting with every breeze. The mind searched for sense in the chaos, but there was none. Everything once secure had been torn away. There was no solid ground to run toward, no safe shelter to seek. Only the horizon, empty in all directions, stretching farther than the eye could reach. It felt like floating inside eternity, where time itself dissolved. Seconds stretched like hours. Each heartbeat felt stolen, fragile, uncertain if another would follow. Fear clawed at the chest, deeper than the salt water, heavier than the weight of soaked clothes. It whispered that this was it, that resistance was useless, that the ocean always wins. Yet even as fear pressed harder, something deeper stirred beneath it, a single thread of will. A thought, faint but sharp, * keep breathing, keep moving. * not tomorrow, not an hour later, not even 10 minutes more. Just this second, just this breath, just one more push against the waves. The sea showed no mercy. Swells rose higher, collapsing like walls of water, slamming down with force strong enough to drag everything under. Each time the body was forced below the surface, lungs screamed, arms thrashed, legs kicked with everything left. Salt burned deeper, chest convulsed, and panic threatened to take control. But breaking the surface again was proof that instinct was stronger than fear. The mind replayed that command, breathe, move, don't stop. Debris floated within reach, shattered panels, a broken seat cushion, a twisted piece of plastic. Hands reached out, clinging to whatever the waves offered, only to have most torn away by the sea's cruel pull. The ocean tested resolve at every moment, stripping away hope piece by piece. Yet even when the wreckage slipped from grasp, the thought remained. There must be something to hold on to, something to keep afloat, something to bridge the distance between life and death. The body trembled uncontrollably, cold cutting deeper than bone, energy leaking away with every movement. Muscles ached from constant resistance, lungs burned with each shallow breath. The temptation to rest grew stronger, to stop kicking, to let the ocean decide. Yet the whisper inside refused silence. The mind replayed it like a rhythm, steady and unrelenting. Keep breathing, keep moving. Even when strength waned, the whisper did not. It echoed louder than the waves, louder than the cries, louder than the pounding heart. The night threatened to arrive too soon. Darkness over the ocean would mean colder waters, unseen dangers, no chance of finding wreckage to cling to. The thought pressed heavier than the waves themselves, but dwelling on what might come was useless. There was only now this breath, this motion, this fragile defiance against the vast sea. Somewhere nearby, a gull screamed, circling above as if mocking the struggle below. The sound sharpened the truth. The ocean was not empty, but it was merciless. Life still existed here, just not the kind that offered help. The sea teemed with shadows below the surface, shapes moving with purpose, drawn by the chaos. Fear surged again at what might rise from the depths, but even that fear could not overpower the command that anchored the mind. The waves continued their assault, lifting high, crashing low, relentless in their rhythm. Each one felt like the last, each one threatened to finish the fight. Yet against every surge, arms lifted, legs kicked, lungs dragged in another gasp, not because there was certainty of rescue, not because there was strength left to spare, but because that whisper refused to fade. Keep breathing, keep moving. The ocean demanded surrender, but defiance grew with each passing moment. Every wave survived was proof that willpower was stronger than fear. Every gasp stolen from the sea was evidence that the fight was not over. The horizon remained empty, salvation invisible. But still the choice repeated itself, fight or sink. And the answer never changed. Every wave rose like a living wall, towering above before crashing down with merciless force. The sound was deafening, a thunder that never ended, each impact shaking the body like a rag caught in a storm. Salt water invaded the mouth, stung the eyes, seared the lungs with every accidental swallow. It was not just liquid. It was fire disguised as ocean, burning from within while smothering from without. Every breath became a gamble. Inhale too soon, and water replaced air. Hold too long, and the chest felt ready to split open. The ocean showed no rhythm, no mercy. One moment the body lifted high on a swell, suspended above the vastness. The next it plunged down into a trough that felt like the bottom of the world. The body slammed against debris, splinters cutting skin, bruises blooming with every collision. Muscles begged for release, screaming under the constant demand to fight back, to kick, to push upward again. There was no pause, no reprieve, only the relentless cycle of rise and fall, impact and struggle. The throat burned raw from salt and gasps. Each cough felt like knives scraping through the chest. Lungs ached with the effort of dragging in enough oxygen to continue resisting. The water wanted to claim them, pressing into every weakness, testing every gap in strength. Each second survived was not a victory but another challenge, daring the body to last one more moment against the pounding of the waves. Fear was everywhere. It clung heavier than the soaked clothes, tighter than the pull of the current. The thought of disappearing beneath the surface, of the silence that would follow, hovered constantly. Yet with every surge of panic came a surge of fight. Arms thrashed harder, legs kicked with more fury, the mind shouted louder, breathe, rise, don't stop. The terror became fuel, turning into strength when the body felt ready to fail. The sea mocked every effort, hurling foam into the face, twisting the body sideways, dragging downward as if determined to prove that resistance was pointless. But still, the head lifted, gasping, eyes searching the horizon for even the faintest sign of something steady, something solid. Nothing came but more water, more endless blue stretching farther than thought could grasp. Hope was fragile, almost invisible, yet it flickered with every breath stolen back from the sea. Pain became a companion. Every limb ached, every joint felt as though it had been pulled beyond its limit. Cuts from jagged wreckage stung with salt, the skin raw from constant friction. Yet none of it mattered compared to the single demand of staying above the surface. Pain could be endured, drowning could not. Each wave that broke overhead reminded that survival was not about comfort. It was about defiance. The ocean moved with purpose, like a predator circling prey. Currents dragged in one direction, then shifted without warning, spinning the body around until there was no sense of where to go. Orientation meant nothing. Up and down blurred, east and west dissolved into chaos. The only certainty was the need to rise, to break through the surface again and again, no matter how many times the sea tried to bury it all. Time disappeared. Minutes felt like hours, hours like days. The sun blazed overhead, mocking with its heat, while the water remained ice, pulling warmth from the body with ruthless efficiency. Shivers began, uncontrollable, violent, shaking every bone. Teeth clenched so hard they ached, not from choice but from the body's desperate attempt to create heat where none existed. Yet even as cold gnawed deeper, the fight continued. The will to breathe was stronger than the body's weakness. There was no room for thought of tomorrow, no room for dreams of rescue. The horizon was too empty, the sea too vast. All that existed was this moment, this breath, this struggle against the next wave. Focus narrowed until it was as sharp as the edge of a blade. There was no past, no future, only now, and the demand that now must not be the end. Occasionally, wreckage drifted close, a floating piece of metal or fabric. Hands reached out, desperate to grip, to cling to something that offered even the illusion of stability. Sometimes it held for a second, sometimes longer, but always the sea ripped it away again, as if mocking the attempt to find relief. Still, hands kept reaching, refusing to accept emptiness. Refusal became as important as oxygen. Shadows began to move below, hints of life in the depths, unseen but undeniable. The thought of what lingered there sharpened fear to a knife's edge. The sea was not just water, it was a kingdom of predators, watching from below, waiting for weakness. Every splash, every movement carried the risk of drawing attention, but still the body moved. Still the lungs demanded air. Still survival shouted louder than terror. Every slam of a wave was a reminder. The ocean did not care. It did not recognize suffering, did not acknowledge the struggle, did not reward courage. It simply was a force too vast to fight, too powerful to conquer. Yet defiance grew stronger with each rise above the waterline. The ocean could crush, could drown, could consume, but it could not erase the will to endure. That will remained, unshaken, shouting in silence against the roar of waves. The hours stretched with cruel indifference, each minute heavy as stone, each second demanding more than the body seemed able to give. The sun, once a distant comfort in the sky, transformed into an enemy. Its heat bore down relentlessly, searing the skin already raw from salt. Blisters formed, swelling and breaking under the harsh touch of both heat and water. The body became a battlefield where sun and sea waged war, each determined to strip away strength piece by piece. The muscles screamed with every movement. Shoulders burned from constant paddling, legs throbbed from endless kicking, hands ached from gripping shards of floating wreckage. Even the smallest motion sent sharp pain radiating through the body, but still movement continued, driven not by strength but by necessity. Stopping was unthinkable. Stillness was surrender, and surrender meant being swallowed by the vastness. Hunger crept in slowly, a gnawing that began in the stomach but soon spread into every fiber. At first it was dull, almost an afterthought compared to the urgency of breathing. But as the hours dragged into an eternity, the emptiness became sharper, twisting like knives inside. The body craved food, any form of sustenance, but there was nothing. Only salt water, undrinkable, taunting, surrounding from every angle yet offering no relief. Thirst was worse. The tongue felt thick, the lips cracked, the throat parched. Each accidental swallow of seawater made it worse, burning with bitterness, drying out the body even further. The mind played cruel tricks, imagining cool rivers, fresh springs, the taste of clear water running down the throat. But reality was unforgiving. The ocean gave nothing but poison. Every thought of water turned into torment, a reminder of how fragile the body was against the immensity of need. The ocean stretched endlessly, horizon after horizon with no break, no promise of land. Time blurred until there was no telling whether it had been hours or days. The sun slid toward the edge of the sky, staining the water in gold and crimson, yet no rescue came. Night loomed, bringing with it new dangers, colder winds, darker waters. Each passing moment threatened to pull away the last fragments of energy. Yet in the hollow pit where despair should have grown, a different force whispered louder, "Hold on." Pain was constant, but it became a companion rather than an enemy. It reminded that life still existed, that the body was not yet finished. Every sting of salt in open wounds, every ache in the muscles, every burn on the skin, all of it was proof that the fight continued. Pain did not mean defeat, it meant endurance. It meant the struggle was still alive. The mind wandered in fragments, torn between the sharp focus of survival and the drifting fog of exhaustion. Thoughts surfaced like debris, memories of calm places, of warmth and safety, only to vanish again beneath the crashing reality of the waves. Each time the head dipped too long below the surface, panic jolted like lightning, snapping back to the present. Survival demanded focus, demanded the push of every breath, demanded refusal to let go. The sea's voice never stopped. Waves hissed, roared, crashed with endless repetition. It was a language of power, a reminder that nature did not bend, did not yield. The body was small, insignificant in comparison, yet within that insignificance grew something unshakable. Defiance, a refusal to vanish into silence. The horizon remained cruelly empty. No ships cut through the waves, no planes traced across the sky. Only the vast dome of blue above and the endless water below. Yet each sunrise, each new hour, brought a strange kind of promise. If another day had arrived, then survival had outlasted the night. If breath still filled the lungs, then the battle had not been lost. The ocean could test every limit, but it could not yet erase the spark of persistence. The body trembled from exhaustion, shivering even beneath the weight of the sun. Muscles twitched uncontrollably, drained of energy yet forced to keep moving. Each motion grew weaker, slower, yet still enough to resist the pull of the water. Strength came not from the flesh, but from the will buried deep, louder than hunger, stronger than thirst. Night fell heavy, wrapping the ocean in shadows. Stars glittered above, cold and distant, reflecting across the black surface of the sea. The world felt infinite, both beautiful and cruel. The water was darker now, hiding everything beneath, every movement below the surface unseen. The fear of what might lurk there was sharp, but even fear became secondary to the demand for survival. Darkness brought cold, and cold sank into the bones, stealing warmth with ruthless hands. Teeth rattled, limbs stiffened, but the will pressed on. Each sunrise brought agony and hope in equal measure. Agony, because the body was weaker than the day before, the skin more torn, the thirst sharper. Hope, because another day meant endurance had triumphed once more. The sun rose like fire, burning both skin and spirit, but it also marked proof that life continued. The ocean gave no mercy, but within its endless cruelty, a lesson emerged. Survival was not a sudden triumph, not a single moment of escape. It was 1,000 tiny choices, made again and again, each one harder than the last. To breathe when the lungs wanted to give up. To kick when the legs screamed for rest. To fight when the body begged for release. It was not strength that kept the head above water. It was the refusal to let go, the stubborn insistence that even one more moment mattered. Hunger gnawed like an animal trapped inside, clawing at the gut, twisting and tearing with a savagery that never eased. At first it had been faint, buried under shock and the frantic struggle against waves. But as time stretched, it sharpened into something unbearable, a hollow scream inside the body that could not be silenced. Every movement sent aches rippling through the stomach, each cramp sharper than the last. The body begged for food, anything bread, rice, fruit, even scraps. Yet nothing came but salt water and emptiness. Thirst was worse. Lips cracked, splitting open with each attempt to draw in breath. The tongue felt swollen, thick, coated with dryness that no swallow could relieve. The throat burned constantly, desperate for moisture. The mind tormented itself with images of clear streams rushing over rocks, the cool sweetness of fresh water pouring down the throat, the taste of rain collected in cupped hands. But the reality was cruel. The ocean stretched in every direction, endless water that mocked with its abundance yet poisoned with every drop. The temptation grew, dark and insistent. Waves slapped against the mouth, droplets splashing past lips. The salt burned, but instinct screamed to drink, to take just a mouthful, to relieve the fire in the throat. Logic fought back, warning of madness, of sickness, of death that came faster than the hunger. The battle raged every second, the craving for relief against the knowledge that relief would kill. Survival demanded refusal, demanded the strength to resist even the body's most desperate cries. The sun blistered overhead, intensifying the torment. Heat baked the skin, drawing moisture from every pore, leaving salt crusted on the flesh. Sweat came and went too quickly, vanishing into the air before it could offer any cooling. The body shriveled under the assault, lips peeling, eyes burning, hands trembling from weakness. The ocean offered no shade, no escape, only its endless reflection of the merciless sun. Fatigue deepened as hunger and thirst hollowed out the body. Movements slowed, each kick against the water weaker than the last. Muscles cramped violently, seizing with pain that forced screams into the wind. Hands clawed at floating debris, clung tightly for a moment of rest, only to slip again when strength failed. Every action felt heavier. Every second of motion dragged like chains across the body. Energy was gone, stolen by the sea, and yet the struggle continued because the alternative was silence below the surface. The mind drifted in and out of clarity, thoughts blurred, tangled with visions that may have been memories or dreams. Faces appeared in the mind's eye, voices whispered promises of comfort, of safety, of warmth. It was unclear whether they were real or illusions birthed from exhaustion. Yet even illusions carried power. They reminded of reasons to hold on, reasons not to sink. In those fleeting images, purpose returned, enough to command one more breath, one more kick, one more refusal to give in. Pain from hunger became something beyond physical. It turned into a rhythm, a reminder that the body still lived, still demanded, still had not surrendered completely. The hollowness in the stomach echoed like a drumbeat, each pang marking the passage of time. Thirst, sharp and unbearable, cut deeper than hunger, but it too became a marker of existence. If the throat still burned, then life still flickered. Shadows beneath the waves reminded constantly of what waited if strength failed. The ocean was not empty. Creatures moved unseen, circling, patient. They needed no rush. Exhaustion would do their work for them. Fear of those depths combined with the hunger and thirst, creating a storm inside as violent as the sea itself. Yet fear too became fuel. The thought of sinking into those black waters was enough to spark movement even when the body felt finished. The sky shifted slowly, sun crawling across the horizon, staining the water's gold before surrendering to dusk. Night returned with a cruel chill, air cutting through skin already burned and blistered. Shivers racked the body, teeth clattered violently, muscles spasmed in waves of cold. Hunger twisted tighter, thirst screamed louder, and exhaustion pressed heavier. Yet the stars above were proof of another day endured. The fight had lasted beyond the sun. The mind clung to the smallest victories. A piece of wreckage kept the chest afloat for longer than expected. A wave that could have crushed instead rolled past with only a splash. Another breath, another second alive, another chance that the horizon might someday break with rescue. Survival was not about abundance. It was about fragment, tiny slivers of hope, small resistances against despair. Hunger screamed, thirst tormented, the body weakened to the point of collapse. But survival was not measured in comfort. It was measured in defiance. The ocean demanded surrender. The sun demanded collapse. The body demanded food and water it could not have. Yet the will to endure roared louder than all of them, even when reduced to a whisper. Survive. That was the only command, the only truth, the only reason to take the next breath and face the next wave. The ocean grew darker, not only from the fading light above, but from the presence of shadows that moved silently beneath the surface. At first, they seemed like tricks of the eyes, swirls of current, patches of darker water. But as time stretched, the truth became impossible to ignore. Something was there. Shapes glided with purpose, smooth, swift, deliberate, circling just out of reach. The water itself seemed to hum with their presence. Each movement beneath the waves felt more than seen. The realization struck with an icy weight heavier than the sea itself. Survival was already a battle against hunger, thirst, exhaustion, and waves that never ceased their assault. Now another enemy emerged, one far more calculated, one that waited with infinite patience. The ocean was not empty. It was alive with predators drawn by the wreckage, by the thrashing, by the scent of vulnerability carried through the currents. Fear tightened like a vice. The heart hammered against the ribs, beating so fast it threatened to explode. Every nerve screamed, every instinct sharpened, every sense strained to detect what lay just below. The water that had been an enemy of force and exhaustion transformed into something far more sinister. Each ripple against the skin felt loaded with threat. Every brush of unseen debris carried the possibility of teeth. Shadows grew closer, the movements no longer illusions. A dorsal fin cut the surface for an instant before vanishing again, leaving only a trail of ripples. The sea felt smaller, though it stretched endlessly, closing in with menace. Panic clawed for control, urging to thrash wildly, to flee, though there was nowhere to go. Every instinct to survive was pitted against the need to remain calm, to conserve energy, to avoid drawing attention. The paradox was torture. Stillness meant less notice, but stillness also meant surrender to the waves. The smell of salt mixed with something sharper, metallic, almost copper. It was the scent of blood, carried invisibly across the water, spreading in tendrils that no current could hide. The predators below would not miss it. They were designed to find it, to follow it, to hunt by it. Every scrape, every cut from debris became not only a source of pain, but an invitation, a beacon calling from miles away. The ocean swelled again, lifting high before dropping low, exposing the vast emptiness on every side. For a brief moment, the full scale of isolation was laid bare. Alone, exposed, surrounded by nothing but dark water and the unseen hunters it concealed. The horizon gave no promise of land, no silhouette of rescue, only the endless, shifting surface that both cradled and threatened. And beneath that surface, the shadows moved closer still. Every second became unbearable anticipation. Was the next brush against the leg a drifting piece of seaweed or the graze of rough skin belonging to something far worse? Would the next swell of water rise harmlessly, or would it break with the force of a predator lunging from below? Each unanswered question was torture, each moment stretched to breaking. Courage became the only shield. Fear threatened to drown as quickly as the waves, pressing down, urging collapse. But surrender to panic would mean frenzy, thrashing, drawing attention faster than blood ever could. The body was exhausted, shaking, weak, yet still it refused to give in. The will to survive hardened into steel, stronger than fear, sharper than despair. Stillness became strategy, calmness became weapon, silence became armor. The predators circled, testing, waiting, calculating. The ocean was their territory, and the wreckage had delivered its offering. Yet the surface was not silent. A body still moved, still resisted, still clung to life. Perhaps it was curiosity that kept them circling. Perhaps hunger, perhaps both. Whatever their reason, their presence was constant, heavy, undeniable. The water itself seemed to vibrate with their energy, each pass beneath sending ripples of dread through the chest. Night deepened, wrapping the sea in blackness. The stars reflected faintly on the waves, broken and scattered with every ripple. Darkness hid the predators from sight, but their presence was no less real. In fact, it was worse unknown, unseen, unpredictable. Every sound carried more weight. The splash of water against floating debris, the faint slap of a fin breaking the surface somewhere too close, the silence between movements that was somehow louder. Then noise. Sleep was impossible. Fatigue dragged at the body, pulling it toward unconsciousness, but fear snapped it back each time. To drift into rest would mean losing vigilance, losing awareness of what circled below. And in that vulnerability, danger would strike. The body trembled violently, partly from exhaustion, partly from cold, but mostly from the unending dread that wrapped tighter than the waves. Yet the presence of danger became more than a threat. It became fuel. Each moment survived in their shadow was proof of resistance. Each second alive was defiance against both ocean and predator. The will grew sharper in their presence, the instinct to cling harder, fight longer, endure stronger. Courage was no longer a choice. It was the only barrier between flesh and teeth. The night dragged on, endless, marked only by the distant calls of seabirds and the faint, constant slap of waves. Shadows still circled, patient, waiting for weakness, but weakness never came, not yet. The ocean demanded fear, but the response was defiance. The predators demanded surrender, but the answer was silence, stillness, and refusal. Each moment longer was victory. Each breath stolen from the sea was proof that the fight was not yet over. The night stretched endlessly, its silence broken only by the restless movements of the ocean. Each wave rose and fell with relentless rhythm, carrying the weight of eternity in its flow. The water that cradled also threatened, pulling at limbs already heavy with fatigue. Muscles ached, joints screamed, skin burned from the salt, and yet the fight to stay afloat continued with a stubbornness that defied the body's collapse. Every second was a negotiation with the sea, a test of strength, will, and spirit. The darkness concealed as much as it revealed. Above, the sky glimmered faintly with stars scattered like distant fires, offering both beauty and indifference. They seemed to whisper of vastness, of worlds beyond suffering, yet their distance deepened the sense of isolation. Below, the depths stretched into infinity, holding secrets and dangers that eyes could not pierce. The unseen was far more terrifying than anything visible. Every brush of current, every shift of water, carried the possibility of something rising from beneath. Time dissolved into a blur. Minutes felt like hours, hours like lifetimes. There was no anchor to measure its passing, only the relentless beat of waves against the body and the deafening sound of breath forcing its way in and out of lungs. Thirst gnawed with unbearable intensity, lips cracked and bleeding from salt, throat raw from gasping air, heavy with brine. Hunger clawed too, feeding it says, cutting deeper with each moment. The body begged for rest, and I'm going to carry it like a badge forever. To close the eyes for even a moment was to risk slipping beneath the surface, to surrender to the pull of exhaustion and let the sea take what it always demanded. Every surge of fatigue was countered by a surge of willpower, fierce and unrelenting. The will was not born of comfort or hope of ease, it was born of refusal. Refusal to yield, refusal to let the waves win, refusal to be devoured by the indifferent abyss. The mind, however, was its own battlefield. Thoughts came in waves as powerful as the sea, rising with hope, crashing with despair. Memories flashed moments of warmth, fragments of laughter, faces longed for but unreachable. They appeared bright against the darkness, fleeting and cruel, both comfort and torment. The more vivid they grew, the sharper the pain of separation became. Yet they anchored the fight, reminders of meaning beyond the water, reasons to endure when endurance felt impossible. At times, the sea seemed alive in more than movement. It breathed, it waited, it pressed against the body as though testing, measuring, questioning the right to remain. Each surge of water was like a challenge, each crash of wave a demand to surrender. Yet with every demand came an answer: struggling arms, a steady breath, the will to remain above rather than sink below. Loneliness crept in like a second tide. The silence was too vast, the absence of another soul too heavy. The ocean swallowed sound, leaving only the echo of breath and the hiss of water. The human spirit was not built for such isolation, and the emptiness gnawed deeper than thirst. Yet within that emptiness arose a strange kind of clarity. Alone, surrounded by nothing but sea and sky, the weight of what mattered revealed itself with piercing sharpness. The fight was not just to remain alive, but to preserve the essence of being, the unbroken refusal to let go of self in the face of the infinite. The body shifted from strength to weakness and back again in cycles. Moments came when arms felt like stones, when eyelids drooped, when the idea of surrender whispered sweetly. But then came a surge, perhaps a wave, perhaps a thought, that reignited the spark. The sea could not be allowed the final word. Every gasp of air was an act of rebellion. Every beat of the heart a declaration that survival would not be so easily stolen. The predators beneath had not vanished. Though unseen, their presence lingered, circling, waiting with patience honed by nature. The knowledge of them was a shadow always pressing against the mind. Each ripple, each shift in current, might be them. Each second carried the chance of attack. Yet fear became less of a chain and more of a sharpened edge. It carved awareness into focus, forcing vigilance, compelling strength. The ocean could take everything else, but it would not take resolve. The horizon offered no promise, yet the eyes searched it endlessly. Every swell of water revealed nothing but more water, yet the search continued, desperate, relentless. Land, a ship, even the faintest light, any sign of salvation would have been enough to ease the burden. None appeared, yet the search itself became ritual, a rhythm to counter the monotony of survival. Looking outward was not only about rescue. It was about refusing to collapse inward, refusing to drown in despair. Pain became constant, woven into the fabric of existence. The salt burned into open wounds, the cold gnawed through skin and bone, the body trembled with exhaustion. Yet pain was also proof of life, a reminder that the body still fought, still breathed, still belonged to the living world above rather than the silence below. To feel was to endure, and endurance was survival. The night was long, yet its passing was inevitable. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the sky shifted. Black softened to gray, stars dimmed into fading sparks, and the horizon grew faintly lighter. Dawn crept with hesitation, fragile but unstoppable. The first light of morning shimmered across the waves, painting the sea with colors that were both cruel and beautiful. The world was no less dangerous, no less vast, but with light came visibility, with visibility came clarity, and with clarity came renewed determination. The sea stretched endlessly, vast and unbroken, a horizon without mercy. Sunlight struck its surface like fire on glass, dazzling yet blinding, offering beauty that mocked rather than comforted. The waves rolled with relentless rhythm, sometimes gentle, sometimes violent, each one a reminder of how small the human body was against such immensity. The ocean was not just water, it was a world in itself, ancient and indifferent, and survival within it required more than strength. It demanded respect for its power and a willingness to adapt to its moods. Every wave carried both threat and opportunity. A sudden swell could drag downward, pressing with a force strong enough to crush lungs. But those same waves, if ridden correctly, could lift just high enough to glimpse the horizon, to breathe when otherwise submerged. Survival became a matter of learning its rhythm, reading its movements, bending to its will instead of resisting blindly. Fighting the sea with defiance led to exhaustion, but moving with it, surrendering enough to stay afloat while still clinging to willpower, became the secret of endurance. Salt water pressed into every cut and abrasion, burning with searing intensity, carving pain deeper into flesh already battered. The skin blistered under the sun by day, chilled to trembling under the night winds, and every inch of it became a battlefield. Salt-crusted lips split open further, salt-inflamed eyes blurred with redness. Salt filled the nostrils and throat with choking reminders that the very thing surrounding could not be consumed. The ocean provided everything except what was needed most. The sound of it was constant, an unending chorus of crashing, splashing, and roaring that silenced all else. At times it became maddening. The mind craved quiet, longed for stillness, but the sea allowed none. Yet in its constancy there was also strange steadiness. The waves came without pause, like the beating of a heart, like the ticking of time. They reminded that while the body fought for survival, the world moved on with or without consent. The sea was alive with creatures both seen and unseen. Small fish darted beneath the surface, flashing silver as they danced in schools. At night, faint bioluminescent trails shimmered like ghostly paths, proof that life thrived even in darkness. Yet with beauty came danger. Shadows lingered deeper down, vast and patient, waiting for weakness. Every brush against the leg carried terror kelp, driftwood, or fin. It didn't matter. Each touch threatened collapse into panic, but panic could not be allowed. Panic was surrender, and surrender meant sinking. The currents told stories of unseen worlds. Some pulled gently, coaxing the body into drifting, while others tore with ferocity, threatening to drag down or away. To resist them blindly wasted precious energy, but to read them, to angle with them, allowed survival. The sea demanded humility, demanded that instinct be sharpened. It was not just a physical enemy, but a teacher, merciless, but offering lessons to those willing to listen. Above, seabirds appeared occasionally, circling with cries sharp enough to pierce the endless roar of waves. They drifted effortlessly, wings stretched, gliding on winds that mocked the struggle below. Their presence meant land somewhere far away, or food hidden beneath the surface. Every sight of them sparked longing, a reminder of solid ground, of nests perched on cliffs, of safety that felt unreachable. They were both torment and hope, symbols of what still existed beyond the grasp of the ocean. The sun marked time, though it felt distorted. When it rose, heat bore down mercilessly, cooking the skin, stealing what little moisture remained. When it fell, cold seeped into bones, leaving shivers that rattled like broken branches. Day and night passed without measure, blending into one another until survival became the only marker of time. Each cycle of light and darkness was a victory, proof of endurance against the unending vastness. Hunger grew sharper with each day, but thirst was the truest torment. The body cried for relief, begged for water, yet the very abundance of it mocked with its undrinkable poison. Waves splashed against the mouth, spraying salt over teeth, into wounds, into cracks in the lips. The temptation to drink grew with every passing hour, the whisper of relief stronger than logic. To resist was torture, but to surrender meant death swifter than hunger. The ocean tested not just strength, but discipline, demanding sacrifice of instinct itself. Driftwood and debris occasionally floated past, fragments of wreckage carried by currents. Each piece was a reminder of what had been lost, but also of what could be used. A splintered plank became a float, a fragment of fabric shielded skin from the sun. A jagged shard served as a tool. The sea destroyed, but it also carried remnants of survival if the eyes were sharp enough to see them. Adapting to those fragments, finding usefulness in ruins, turned despair into fragile hope. The horizon was a line that never drew closer, an eternal edge that shifted with every wave. Yet it pulled the gaze endlessly, a silent promise that beyond it lay salvation. Staring at it became ritual, a way to hold on to purpose. Even when nothing appeared, no sails, no land, no light, the act of looking kept despair from consuming completely. The horizon was possibility, and possibility was enough to fuel another breath. The sea was both adversary and companion. It threatened constantly, but it also kept alive. Its waves lifted when strength gave out. Its debris provided fragments to cling to. Its currents carried farther than human strength could alone. The relationship was one of tension, of fragile coexistence. To despise it entirely was to waste energy, to surrender to fear. To respect it, to learn its rhythm, was to increase the chance of survival. Each hour spent in its grasp carved deeper lessons into the soul. The ocean was not only water. It was trial, test, and truth. It stripped away comfort, stripped away illusion, leaving only raw willpower and instinct. Survival within it was not about conquering, but about enduring, about finding balance between resistance and surrender. Against its vastness, nothing human could seem significant. Yet within its cruelty, the smallest act of defiance, the refusal to sink, the choice to breathe, became a victory louder than the roar of waves. The sky shifted slowly from black into shades of gray, then bled into streaks of gold as the sun rose again, casting its brilliance over the endless ocean. Light shimmered across the water, dazzling and cruel, illuminating both beauty and despair. It revealed no land, no ships, no rescue, only waves rolling in eternal rhythm. Yet the arrival of dawn meant another day survived, another battle faced. Survival itself became measured in sunrises, each one a fragile victory against the endless sea. The body ached in ways words could not capture. Muscles stiffened from relentless strain, skin blistered from sun and salt, and the hollow ache of hunger carved deeper with each passing hour. Thirst gnawed even harder, an agony that never eased. Lips split further, blood mingling with salt. Every breath scraped through a throat that felt carved from stone. The body was no longer whole, but fragments stitched together by sheer will. Each movement demanded more strength than seemed possible, yet movement continued. The mind, strained by exhaustion, drifted between clarity and fog. Thoughts blurred, sometimes lost in the rhythm of the waves, sometimes snapping sharply into focus. Visions surfaced, faces of loved ones, places once taken for granted, promises unfulfilled. They rose and fell like the tides themselves, sometimes bringing comfort, other times deepening the pain of distance. But within those memories lay the essence of endurance. They were reminders of why the struggle mattered, why each breath had to be taken even when every instinct screamed to let go. The ocean remained merciless. Waves slapped against the body, salt burned into wounds, and currents pulled in directions that made no sense. Each swell was a test, demanding surrender, daring exhaustion to win. Yet somehow, each time, the surface was regained. Gasping breaths filled the lungs again and again, proof that endurance had not yet been broken. Every moment above water was an act of rebellion against the ocean's relentless hunger. The sun climbed higher, and heat descended like a hammer. Skin blistered further, eyes squinted against glare so bright it seemed to set the world aflame. Sweat, once a relief, no longer came. The body was too drained to release moisture. Every ounce of liquid had been stolen, leaving dryness so profound it seemed impossible to endure. Hunger, though sharp, paled against thirst, which consumed thought after thought, demanding relief that could not come. The temptation to drink, to take in the endless water all around, became nearly unbearable. The sea mocked with its abundance, but survival required refusal, even when refusal felt like torture. Birds circled faintly in the distance, their cries cutting through the roar of waves, They glided effortlessly on the wind, unbothered, untouched, while the struggle below dragged on. Their presence sparked both hope and torment. Hope, because where birds flew there might be land. Torment, because their freedom was unreachable, their ease a painful reminder of helplessness. Still, watching them kept the mind focused outward rather than sinking into despair. As hours stretched, hallucinations blurred the line between reality and dream. Shapes danced on the horizon, shimmering like mirages. Sometimes it seemed as though a ship's mast pierced the sky, or land rose in the distance, only to vanish with the next swell of water. These illusions both tortured and fueled, for even if false, they kept the gaze fixed outward, searching, refusing to stop looking for salvation. The act of searching itself was survival, keeping despair at bay with the fragile thread of possibility. Night eventually returned, carrying with it the chill that bit to the bone. Shivers replaced the burns of the sun, and exhaustion deepened as the body trembled uncontrollably. Yet the stars emerged again, scattered across the sky in patterns that had guided sailors for centuries. Their presence offered both insignificance and belonging insignificance in the vastness of the universe, belonging in the reminder that even in endless darkness, light persisted. The ocean beneath whispered constantly, its rhythm both threat and lullaby. Fear lingered with every unseen shadow that brushed against the body, but fear also sharpened the will. The knowledge that predators circled below, waiting for weakness, became another reason to fight, to stay alert, to keep the body above rather than sinking below. Terror, instead of paralyzing, became fuel. Endurance was no longer about strength alone. It became about fragments, tiny victories stitched together, breaths taken one at a time, moments of calm seized between storms. Survival was built not on certainty of rescue, but on refusal to surrender in the face of endless uncertainty. Each second lived was proof of victory, however small, however fleeting. The ocean, vast and indifferent, seemed determined to strip away everything comfort, strength, hope. But even stripped bare, there remained something it could not take. That quiet, unyielding fire deep within, the decision to endure despite everything, to defy even when defiance seemed impossible. Survival was not about overpowering the sea. It was about outlasting it, about refusing to let its vastness erase the will to live.